Hello Pioneers, and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Candle Close News. Today I wanted to bring you all a special video that was very informative and educational on the Jubilee and Shmita year. I've already done a part 1 of the Shmita and decode and shared it with you all in the past, so something if you haven't caught, maybe you can go back and check out and look into. I'll share that with you all right here. It is, of course, we'll be talking about the Day of Atonement and Jubilee, the Shmita today, but the past video that I've spoken about recently is right here. April showers might just bring us May flowers. And we spoke a lot about the ritualistic time period of May and the start of Beltane, etc., as well as Skull and Bones. So something you can get refreshed up on as we get ready to kick off this very educational video. So the Shmita and Jubilee year is something that we brought up in almost every video for well over a year now. And this time period starts on sunset of September 25th, which is also called Elul 29, which is around the new moon of September. We know the day of Rosh Hashanah will be September 26th this year, which is the transition into Tishri 1, which will be the last day, leading into the last day on September 27th, 2022, Tishri 2. So this is like a multi-day event, a 2-3 day event. We know the Rosh Hashanah and Jewish New Year is the anniversary and creation of Adam and Eve and the judgment of God as king. And we know that no work is permitted on this day and is practiced in Judaism. So throughout this time period, we've been learning that the Jewish influence on the market, especially at the higher levels of the Talmudic Cabal, it plays a high role in how the market fluctuates and moves. And we've been able to pinpoint certain dates in the Hebrew New Year that have shown us a lot of correlation with this in the past. So again, it's not just your everyday normal perception of things when you view these markets or the religious view of these things that we talk about. It's more like the cyclical and astrological component of how this market operates. And we're going to talk about the Gregorian calendar as well, the American calendar that we go by, trying to combine it all and making sense of all of it, just showing us patterns of how this dates back in time and is correlating now as well. We know that this is a moving date, Rosh Hashanah, so every year it's on a different day in the Gregorian calendar. So it's important to follow along every year with this, because it might get a little confusing to some that are unaware of what plays out here in this realm. So use Google and the internet when you need to figure out when Rosh Hashanah is. That's what we do. You know, it's very easy. They give us the truth. It's out there. We just got to do the due diligence and hard work. So we know Rosh Hashanah is September 25th through September 27th, the transition through the Hebrew New Year of 5782 into the year of 5783. And we know again, this is the Day of Atonement, and this is where we'll get into some of the gematria. I believe that this next Jubilee year, the 50-year biblical Jubilee, is leading into 2023, and I'm going to show you by the end of this video why. We see Day of Atonement gives us 59, and we know that we're in the year of the Tiger in the Chinese New Year. Something we've shared with you dating back to February. February 2nd is when we entered this, and it's the year of the Tiger, or Jupiter, the Tiger striped planet. So very important. We'll pay attention to that. But Tiger giving us that same 59. I don't typically like to breed my ciphers, but I do when I've got a, how do I want to say this? When I've got a knowledge base behind my decoding, I like to cross ciphers if it has substantial meaning. Like we're both getting the 59. The Day of Atonement is happening this year in September on the 27th when we enter the year of Jubilee. So it's very important. This is the year of the tiger, the 2022 year. So I'm crossing the ciphers in a very exoteric kind of way. This 61 that we got in Day of Atonement is tying us into, as well as the Shmita year we are in. 61 is the 18th prime number. And that 61 is in the Chaldean cipher, and we're getting the 18 in Shmita in Chaldean as well. So it's all very esoteric, and this is where, a lot of it makes a lot of sense to me as to why when you see Jubilee giving you the 23 in Chaldean, tying us into the same 23 we get in the Jewish Hebrew New Year of 5783 that we're transitioning into, it's kind of showing me that this is the next Jubilee year, that the last one was 1973. So very important. Gematria is essentially a alphanumerical code that you're taking a letter, word, phrase, name, etc., and turning them into numbers, adding all those numbers and getting these ciphers. So I pay a lot of attention to this. Very hidden. We know that the Jewish Hebrew culture, high elites, still use this to this day and have for thousands of years. So very important. When I want to narrow things down, it's definitely using these things, and especially this Chaldean cipher, the most purest one. So I'm trying to make this very simple for anyone that's new here and new to Gematria. Of course, like I said, it's being practiced. You practice it as well. Use it for your life. Take advantage of it. We know the Kabbalah, the Talmud, etc. They are. So the decoder is being a part of this higher level, whether it's the rabbi or the rabbi, etc., or you. This is where the knowledge is stored. The exoteric information that we watch play out every day. The architecture, etc. The magic rituals. It's very cool. Life-changing to me. Whether it's Hebrew Gematria or Greek isopsophy, it's coming back to some sort of word system, and I'm going to break this all down for you throughout this video today. So very important. This 5782 this year, 2022, we're in the Gregorian year of 2022. We've talked about this 22 number all year. Esoterically, it means the master builder, master destroyer number, the master architect number. And the fact that we're moving into 5783 and it adds up to 23. 23 is a very important number as well. It ties us into Bitcoin when we type that out. And that's something we go over on this channel. Very important. Bitcoin's the new financial system we'll see implemented on the world stage. So very important. Giving us the same 23. 23 is the 9th prime number. Bitcoin is highly tied to this 23 and 9. Even BTC, the ticker symbol, gives you this 9 in Chaldean. Alright, so that's very important. It ultimately shows us and ties us back into the sun, giving us that same 9 in full reduction. Bitcoin is the sun, it is Sol, it is Ra, it is Helios, the overall energy in the cryptocurrency market. Something we share with you all here. But this 9 is considered completion or spatial infinity, everything. So very esoteric. So while the number 0 represents nothing, the cosmic egg, the womb that gives birth to every number, 9 essentially represents everything. Okay? Alright, so very important. So knowing the numbers and the meaning behind numbers is very important. If you're new here, once you learn the meaning behind 0 through 9 and the numbers, you learn everything. Once you get a little bit more advanced back to this number 23 and you break it down to the 9th prime number, it's very important. And there are other ways you can perceive this 23. 2 3s, that 33. So very esoteric. You can break the 23 down even more by 2 plus 3 is 5. So very important. But the Jubilee year that we're talking about in this video is the end of 7 cycles of 7. And it talks about this right here. In the Bible, the year of Jubilee occurs after 7 sets of 7 intervals, 49 total. So the following year would be the Jubilee year. So it'd be this next year, the 2023 year, the 223 year, the Skull and Bones year, which is a reason why I brought that number up in my work, dating all the way back to February, right before the Super Bowl, a day leaving 223 days left in the year, and then we saw the Super Bowl in 20-23, 2-2-3. All very esoteric and pre-programmed to an algorithmic code. Just something we prove here for over a year now. So very important. But this 7th year in Judaism, they practice the Shmita. So when you have 7 cycles of these 7 sabbatical years, the Sabbath year, you have 49 years, okay? So this 49 is 7 times 7, the square root of 7. It's all about the sevens, okay? And this is the connection to the Jubilee year. 7 squared is the 49. So next year is going to be the main year to pay attention to. Alright, so meaning Jubilee is practiced on the 50th year, this upcoming Rosh Hashanah, September 27th, the last day. It's very important to take note of because nobody actually knows when this day is, the Jubilee year. Not even the rabbis know. It's kind of up for you to interpret it. It's very exoteric. But what we can do is look back in the past and see the events that have occurred and take it from there. And there are a few people out there that are saying 2015, and they came to this grandiose conclusion that that was the Jubilee cycle. And I'm not so hell-bent on that. I got a lot to say about that. And today we're going to focus on the data, and we're going to focus on the 1970s and the Richard Nixon shock. We know the Jubilee year largely deals with land, property rights, and finance. This is sometimes referred to as the Sabbath's Sabbath. And I'll type that out so you understand. The Sabbath, giving us the 39. And that's tying us all the way into Father Time, Chronos, Saturn, Odin, okay? Very important. It's all about Saturn, okay? And the sevens, all right? And I'll prove that because Father Time is Chronos. It is Saturn being the 21 in Chaldean, the 3 sevens. 7 plus 7 plus 7 is 21. Like on the jackpot, you have the 3 sevens on the slot machine. So very important. But this Father Time and Sabbath this year, the Jubilee year, heading into what we're heading into, ties us into Father Time. Again, always coming back to Saturn and Chronos, Odin. Okay, so very important. How'd I mess that up? I got an extra R in there, sorry. So Father Time, you can see here the 39, okay? And the 39 in Sabbath Saturn. So the same cipher, the purest one, giving us that connection here. So the Sabbath Sabbath is taken care of by Saturn or Father Time, which is also the god of harvest. And everything regarding Judaism is coming back to the harvest and Saturn. The day they take off during the week is Saturn Day, okay, the Sabbath day. So this is all very, very important. Another connection is this is called the sabbatical year. When we type out Saturn, we get that same 21, and when we type out sabbatical, we get that same 21. So very important. We know Saturn is the god of harvest and holds the scythe, or is referred to as death or the grim reaper. So very important. just something I think we should pay attention to. We know the God of harvest on the year of the release, which is the Jubilee, and that's what the Shmita is leading up into. Something I've talked about for a year now. So very, very important. All right. This was something I was talking about way before we saw the market talk come in last year, even in cryptocurrency. Way after we saw this market liquidity injected after the Federal Reserve and the C-19 pandemic all the way up into 2020, June and July, I was talking about an automatic rally in August, September, the National Preparedness Month, and the Shmita, and how on August 5th, 33 days before the Shmita, how it would be important to get ready to de-risk if you didn't take advantage right here. So very important. Hopefully you were able to de-risk in this time period before we see where we're at now today, in the Shmita year, heading into the Jubilee year. So very important. According to all this that we've talked about for a year now, if you paid attention and watched the channel, you've been able to de-risk leading into this time period at 69K when we called it 3 weeks in advance, and every opportunity that I've talked about over the last 8 months that was very important. Our exit strategy leading into Satoshi Nakamoto's 47th birthday, where we saw Bitcoin hit 47K for the last time on April 5th before this most recent dip. So, and there were multiple opportunities I've given to my pioneers, like December 27th, when we saw this massive bull trap from 51K or 52K in the 52nd week of the year. Just all using gematria, numerology, and astrology, seeing the connections to prepare my pioneers for what we could see in the future, and then it playing out, and it's all documented. So very important. But getting back on page here, we know September, and septem in Latin is the prefix of 7. And we know that the Shmita last year started on September 7th. Okay, so we know that September is really the 7th month, so it was really a 7-7 day. If you're paying attention to the true calendar, it's all about the sevens. Remember, in 2021, the 7 year, 7 plus 7 plus 7 is 21. So this was a 7-7 date. So very important. But this day ends on, or the next Rosh Hashanah starts on, we'll say September 25th, 2022, which is one year and 18 days. 1 day off of the 119 or the 911. We know how important this number is. It's important to break down this data, and so you can understand it, and make the best decisions from that. But this key event that's happened around the last Jubilee time period of 1973 has brought us up to what we're going to be talking about in just a moment, and that's the Nixon shock, because I think it's all tied to this all-seeing eye and this 119, the eye of providence, just all algorithmically pre-programmed well in advance by a higher elite apex predator, one that we don't see on the TV. Remember, they give us puppets to keep us distracted, lost, broken, and confused on our Broken Compass news. So very important. And also, we're in August, a few days after August 15th, which was in 1971 when the Nixon shock happened. So this is very important that I bring all this up. But the Shmita year and Jubilee year, starting last year on September 7th, the year of the sevens, all around this time frame, ending on a date this year that adds up to 77. From the decoding perspective, I just wanted to throw that out there, since we were on numbers for a moment. But now we're going to talk about the Nixon shock, and the importance of that. We know how important it was in 1971 when they ended the convertibility of gold and moved us over to the petrodollar. They started backing our dollar by oil. We saw massive inflation and gas lines, etc. Same thing that we're seeing this year and last year in the economy. It's like history repeats itself, but it's never the same. This ended the Bretton Woods system that was fully operational back in the 1940s. This was one of the key events that ended that, and that's so important to take note of that. But for those of you that are really unaware what this series of economic measures was, it was a time period of measures taken by Nixon in 1971 in response to the increase in inflation that we're seeing today. And freezes of prices, surcharges on imports, the cancellation of the United States dollar to gold. We know it's still to this day, though, the world reserve currency. And the move to that regarding gold and fiat, it's really making me wonder if we're going to see something very similar with crypto and blockchain technology today, from a certain, Joe Biden with having a little economic measure problems himself, inflation problems himself. It's just very similar. It looks like a setup to me. And I just want to share that with you all, just kind of open it up and see how you all feel about that. Another important event that happened around this time period was the 1973-1975 recession, and you can look that up if you wanted to. The same year that the Nixon shock happened, we saw the World Economic Forum was formed and founded, and that's kind of coincidental to me, I guess, seeing as how the World Economic Forum today is speaking of a great reset for the economy and finances, and bringing up a term of the new Bretton Woods 2.0. It's all just right there. If we just match the dots, it's pretty amazing. The same year as the Nixon shock, and now they're talking about Bretton Woods, the same thing we saw in 1944 that was ended by the Nixon shock. So, just guess what year we're in. It's 1973 all over again, 1972. It's pretty obvious. I don't know, it's very noticeable to me at least. It's all a setup that mimics this current environment, and that's why I'm considering this current upcoming Rosh Hashanah and Shmita ending to be the start of the Jubilee. Not 7 years from now, not 7 years before in 2015. That was all about China and their financial problems. America's the world power, they say, We know that's not true. They just are the best in the military industrial complex, pretty much, and that's it. But anyways, back to talking about Platinum Jubilee and the 70th anniversary of Queen Elizabeth. Remember, when we typed out the Shmita, it was giving us this 70. Sabbatical gives us 70. She just had her 70th year anniversary as the Queen. We know Omicron was a variant we saw on the world stage that gave us a value of 70 in Greek isopsophy. So very esoteric as to why we see these things this year. As we're heading into the biblical Jubilee year. So when we talk about Queen Elizabeth and the Shmita and these matching connections to, where's she at? Queen Elizabeth, it's very important. The fact that it's the 70th year of her being the queen, and the word Shmita, the way it's classically translated, sabbatical, the way it's translated, giving us 70, Omicron giving us 70, it's all about the sevens, something I've shared in the past. So we got a couple matches when we typed out some very important events that happened this year as well. Of course, Queen Elizabeth giving us that amazing 55. Bitcoin hit its 69K top in the year of the Shmita, right after the Shmita started, right after Rosh Hashanah last year. And she just had her, I spelled platinum wrong, sorry you guys, bear with me, but she just had her Platinum Jubilee. giving us that same 55. And it, this 62 was very important. We broke that down. I won't break that down today, but to see the Platinum Jubilee start when it did on February 6th, etc., the mirror of 62, it was very important. But it gave us the same 55. We saw Pluto's return this year on February 22nd, the 222 date in the 2022 year. But Pluto's return also give us that same 55. And we know Pluto's return is, well, it's Hades. It's the death of destruction and rebuilding. So very important that we see all this year, right? Matching into this code that we see that's over 1,000 years old. So very important. But it's all tying us back into, again, Satoshi Nakamoto, the father time of cryptocurrency, giving us that same 55. So all very esoteric this year. So again, this is matching everything that we've talked about this year, giving us the exoteric connections, showing us that this next year could be the Jubilee year. At least my beliefs from everything I'm sharing with you all, and very important that we take note of all the connections that I'm making. It's giving us a setup, I do believe. Again, just to revisit something that we shared earlier, was Bretton Woods was ended by the Nixon shock. Bretton Woods giving us that same 170. Well, we know that matches the Platinum Jubilee we're getting this year, that 170. And they're talking about this year a Bretton Woods 2.0. It's just not surprising, right? Nixon shock was the end of the Bretton Woods system. Not the exact event that abolished it, but it was a series of events, and it was the key event, Richard Nixon, and then the convertibility to gold. So just very important. We see Russia is moving away from the dollar. Other countries are moving away from the dollar. How could they do that if the dollar was the world reserve currency and the number one in power? Well, it's not no more, So it's all very similar if you're paying attention. So let's talk about a little bit of Dow Jones, 1973. If we were to go back and look at that time period, we'll pull this on the weekly real quick. Because this is what I see the last Jubilee year was, 1973, right after the, August 15th, Richard Nixon shock. And we'll be talking about the comparison to this year and August 15th on the Bitcoin charts. Excuse me. Had to get a drink of water, you guys. I'm going at it. On the Bitcoin charts, we'll be comparing the August 15th this year and what happened that day, and making some exoteric connections in this video or the next one. I don't know how long this one's going to be. I'm kind of just on here going with the flow, one take, uncut. I'm just trying to get out of my headspace that I've been in for quite a few days. But again, we see this time period that was very important to pay attention to. When did our market cycle top happen this year? Right at, January. And if we go to around January of 1973, that's when the top came in. So very important, right there around January, entering into the Shmita cycle, which was pretty much a downtrend with some peaks along the way. Okay, and that's what we've seen over the last 8 months in cryptocurrency. So very important. So right here around September, the end of the Shmita, we see an automatic rally before, just a sell-off and a drop before we roll over even lower. Okay, and we saw this peak right before, that we talked about was January, where we saw Bitcoin recently hit its high around January, the 52nd week of last year. We had a relief rally before falling off in a downtrend that we talked about for 8 months here. So in my work, we've been talking about how the Shmita and the end of the Shmita, we can possibly still go much lower. And the timing of when we go lower is what we're trying to discuss today and be open-minded to. there's different iterations to every Shmita cycle. Not every one is identical. So some of them are pretty scary, but they're not all the same. I just want to focus specifically on this one. And we're talking about the early 1970s and the Jubilee year. The past Jubilee year, I believe, 1973 to 1974 time frame, leading into 1975, where we just drowned it out even lower. When we made a lower low in structure and a lower low in structure than this low, and then a break, just long, arduous break. This was a 36% drop in the Dow Jones in 1974. If crypto was around that at that time period, it would be like a 90% drop. That's what it would be like for crypto. You'd have a washout of all the bullshit cryptos. They'd go to zero, like Terra Luna, So this is very, like I've talked about, comparing the .com bubble to the current crypto environment. If you want to know more about that, rewatch some of the videos we've done over the last month. I've talked about how this is a comparison to the .com bubble. But I love this chart right here. I feel like this is very clean. When you pay attention to this 223, 322 exponential movement average, once we broke above both of those, after we came back and held support, we got our relief rally. But where did we ultimately gravitate back down to before getting rejections and setting a low after the Shmita and leading into the recent Jubilee year, 50 years ago that I'm saying? Even going back 50 years, the 223, 322 exponential movement averages show you can use these on any chart for any stock or crypto you have if you build the mindset and learn how to use just these two indicators. You can set yourself up in the future. Not financial advice, but again, this number 223, 322, we're heading into the 2023 year, the next Jubilee year. It's all about skull and bones. 223, something we share. So not surprising. Very important. Skull and Bones being the university, a Yale University fraternity, secret order, also known as the Brotherhood of Death, something so secret that they say they don't even talk about it, but we do here. So go and do your own due diligence and research. We'll get rid of some of these tabs now. But going back to this Dow Jones chart, it's just very important that we pay attention to that. And the other Shmita years going back, 1987, 1993, we might speak about those in just a moment. This is, if we were to compare it to today's price action, we're kind of possibly in this recovery and bounce and long, arduous, drawn out period before setting this lower low after the Shmita. When, again, is something we're talking about in this video. So not surprising, very important. Alright, where do we want to go from here? I think we want to make a few comparisons. We want to make a few comparisons between the S&P 500 and the 2001-2007 market cycle. So not just about crypto, we're talking stocks as well. Going back in time, collecting data to prepare ourselves for the future. So we call this the .com bubble, 9/11, etc. So to the right, we have the Shmita 2007-2008 housing market crisis, S&P 500, and the 2001 9/11 .com bubble. So it's almost scary how similar and identical these look, right? The Nasdaq we'll get into in a minute. It was very isolated, so don't pay attention to that until we talk about it. It's mostly tech stocks, very similar to crypto. So looking at the S&P, something that's not nearly as volatile, something that's much more cyclical and predictable, we're seeing very similar percentage moves in the S&P every Shmita cycle, going back in 100+ years. Okay, so that helps us out as teachers to share with you all on how to predict the market and time the market. It's not easy, but it's helped when you're aware of the things that we teach here. And when you see the similarities and the cyclical natures playing out, you're able to take advantage of things ahead of time. So we have a top, a big correction, a final relief before another break of structure. So we have a top, a decrease with a relief, a break of structure, and just a downtrend. Ultimately same thing. Both leading to continuation in the end. Just leading into long, drawn out accumulation for the unsophisticated or the uncommon 1%. The unsophisticated analyst and trader is freaking out and selling this bottom instead of buying. Not financial advice. So what we're going to talk about next is the Nasdaq. 2001 compared to 2007, 2008. So very extreme, very similar. All of these that I just previously talked about, by the way, we're getting rejections from the golden pocket of the fib pool from the highs to the lows. Remember that. Very, very important. How important this golden pocket, the 618 to the 786, the 702 being in the middle. So very important. We could see a final rally towards the end of the Shmita around September is where this started to come in. How important is the Shmita going back in time? Very important. It's where all the major corrections happen. The 702 too, that's where it came in. It's not always going to be in your default settings when you pull up your fibs. You can add that in though by going to the settings and changing it. So we have our top pullback, hit the 702 with a pullback and a 702, another hit, but it's a double top. That's a very M-like pattern. So that's bearish, and we see a break of structure. So something to consider here, something we've seen since last year after ultimately setting higher highs last year and then seeing a break of structure. Well, that's what's happened. So initial high with a drop, an automatic rally to the 702, a double top just like back here, and a sell-off with another rally that didn't quite get to the 618. So even a dead cat can bounce before a break of structure. So it's all right there. Now let's look at the Nasdaq right now today. If we were to pull it up and look at it on the daily time frame, it's there. It is. It's pretty scary, you guys. What are we seeing? We're seeing a high with a automatic pullback, a selling climax after a buying climax, and an automatic rally to the 702. What are we seeing? A potential another break in structure, leading to even lower lows back down to around the 223, the 322 exponential moving average that we haven't touched since 2020. March of 2020, which is the C19 sell-off. Like, you tell me, you guys, what do we typically see? We'll see. But the 702 fib today is sitting at around, 192, 193. That's a prime number of some sort, if I can remember correctly. But this 187 we're sitting at, that's the penal code for murder. I'm just saying. But the reason I wanted to talk about the Nasdaq right now today is because it's mostly the tech sector, and it allows us something that's more comparable to the cryptocurrency conversation. So I hope it's all making sense. So slightly just paying attention to this potential rejection from the 702 before ultimately seeing a break in structure over time. Back down to around 130, 120 possibly for the Nasdaq. Maybe even lower. Very important. We can have a mimic of the 2008, 2001 cycles for the Nasdaq. So, anyone that's paying attention to this, it could be very important for them if they know how to analyze and pay attention to these markets moving forward. This could be something that could prepare you for the next several months in advance, depending on what happens here. We're not making predictions, we're just viewing the past data and seeing where we're at right now today. It's unsurprisingly very similar. So very important that we pay attention to the information that we're getting today. Undeniable. All right. I think now we're going to go to a little bit of Bitcoin, 2014, 2015 Shmita cycles, and make a little bit of comparisons there as well. Alright, so Bitcoin in the last current Shmita cycle, which was 2014, and now comparing it with the current Shmita cycle of 2022. So very important that we pay attention to this. We know that there was only 4 years of chart history before this previous 2014 Shmita cycle for Bitcoin, which means it was just very, very limited data, and it was very new. So we're working with something that's very small and only has a limited amount of information, even at 13 years old for Bitcoin. 13 is not old, okay? So going back to this 2013, 2014 early cycle peak, and then seeing a dramatic pullback. Obviously, boom, double bottom before recovering. Over time that we're at today, previously hitting 69K. This was $151, double bottoming. 151 is the 36 prime number. The 36 is 666. So this double bottom and never breaking the real dramatic bottom the first time is showing us holding structure. That's very important. That could be something to take into consideration today. We could just double bottom around that 17,500 range, that 174. Very important. Something we could see play out. Everybody thinks we're going to dramatically go lower than 17K. We could just double bottom if that's what we do over time, over the next few months. Who knows? Before continuation. Very important to pay attention. I don't think it's going to, truly repeat 2 Shmita cycles back to back in a row, though. So that's something to pay attention to as well. But it might. So, very important. Very interesting. This was around the 200 or 0.236 Fibonacci retracement level that we got these price actions and movements, and here we are breaking the 236 today in 2022, breaking a low, and then bringing this rally back up to the 236. What could happen from here? Is this rally or is it this rally? We don't usually see a rally like this and then continuation. If we see a rally like this and continuation of that's very V-bottom recovery, that's something that is really hopium, but that's overexerted. That's going to be overheated on certain indicators and oscillators that are going to be very key to watch out for if we were to see that in the future. It wouldn't shock me, but if there's something to decouple Bitcoin from the regular markets, because it did it already in 2014 right here. So let's be open-minded to that. But we're going to have to pay attention to this 236 level, pulling our fib from our 69K top to our 17.5 bottom. So very important over the next month. So again, this last Shmita and right now, this is very important. Cycle top to cycle bottom. Cycle top to cycle bottom. Immediate reaction, immediate reaction. We could call this, like I said, this, but I'm looking at this as this right here. And that's why you see these red arrows. I'm looking at this through the lenses of the timing of the Shmita. This is the start and the finish of the Shmita. The start and the finish of the Shmita. So I'm considering this peak to be identical or very similar to this very quick rejection. And that's why I've been talking about a 28 to 33, 37K if we're lucky Bitcoin. Recently in my work over the last month. And that's very similar to what I think we're seeing right now. Is this very parabolic price rise before getting bull trapped even lower. Absolutely could happen. So very important to pay attention to. Alright. So we've talked about a lot moving forward in a grandiose view for cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. I've been breaking this 2-hour time frame down for all of my pioneers for quite some time now, and well, here we are again. We see that if we bring up our VPVR, our volume price velocity range, we see that this recent sell-off for cryptocurrency that came in right around August 15th, which ties us back into, 50 years ago and the Richard Nixon shock. Not surprising that this came in off the top side of our bear flag, which we knew was a bullish until it broke pattern. We had a chance that we could have broke to the upside as a bullish pattern, or we know a bear flag also has a target downside. One thing to talk about now is that we still just came back and held structure in support of this previous range at around $20,000, this very psychological range. We know how important these psychological numbers are, but showing us a lot of volume price and right here in the markets, the histograms on the 2-hour time frame flipped bullish right as we fell into this. So again, showing me confirmation that whales or someone is buying up Bitcoin at this time period right here. All this volume just perfectly fell to this level. It's not surprising. So this psychological $20,000 range, breaking our 2,500, which is where we've gravitated right back up to after this sell-off. We knew that was a possibility. We didn't see it around the pivot date of the last opportunity that I talked about. We actually saw that pivot date continue bullish, which if you watch the 43-minute to 47-minute of my last video where we talked about self, you would see that I called that this was a possible opportunity to hold and not quite go as low as this 22,300 before continuing back up. One thing we'll keep note of is that this 223 exponential moving average has not yet flipped the 322. And until it does, we're still just hoping for a bounce on them two indicators to continue to see this momentum vault right back up into our bear flag before breaking back above 22,300, the 223, and moving on up to that 23 or that 28,000 to $30,000 range that we talked about for Bitcoin. But we're gonna have to see volume come into this market and come into this market soon for cryptocurrency if we were to see this. So again, not a lot of volume. Seeing this recent August 19th sell-off and volume in the markets, bringing us down ultimately $911, the 119,911 as we get ready to head into September 11th, 9/11 next month on the 2-hour time frame. That wasn't surprising to me. That was the candle that broke us down past the 223 level that we talk about. So ultimately, esoterically, always tying in by the numbers here if you know how to perceive them. We'll turn off this VPVR. But again, if we can regain support of this 21,500, then I don't see us retesting this 1993, then a previous Shmita year. That's a range that we're going to want to be accumulating. Any green range, we're going to want to accumulate Bitcoin. That's why they're labeled like this and have been for months. This is de-risking ranges and have been the entire time. So very important. We were holding tremendous support of this heart line for well over a month. But for 3 months, we've been breaking down this 2-hour time frame almost perfectly. I know I've taken some weeks off with the recent losses to a couple of my dear friends, and I thank you all for being patient with me. You're all true pioneers and divergents and glitches that have bared with us through this time. So I appreciate you all for that. But again, just seeing this all play out by the ranges, by the numbers, to the code, around certain dates and pivots, it's undeniable. We knew that the last pivot date we were looking for was right there around August 11th. Rest in peace, Rex. That was the date, his incident happened. The full moon of August, Harp's birthday, something we were talking about that led into heliacal rising on the 12th. And on the 12th, we know the heliacal star, the Sirius star, well, it rises again. And, well, this wash off on the 11th and rising again. It was something that's very symbolic to astrology and what we saw playing out in the charts as well, coming back to retest a previous top that we couldn't hold support of right there at around 23,700 before ultimately getting 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out. It's not surprising, and just this bear flag parallel channel that we haven't moved, it's amazing to see the rejection come in at that level. Ultimately, I think this is just a possible, very fake out opportunity right here. Not financial advice. We'll see how this plays out, but I think it's going to be very similar to this time period back here, or this right back here as well, as we look at the 2-hour time frame. Again, we move in impulsive wave, corrective wave, impulsive wave, corrective wave, impulsive wave, corrective wave, impulsive, corrective. So we're going to have to continue to see how this plays out moving forward. But I think this was a great video to get started back on the Daily Candle Close news for you all, and just breaking it down, just doing it all the way we do it, one take, uncut. So take care, God bless, and I hope you all enjoyed this Decode and Jubilee special and Shmita breakdown. I know a lot of people are just thrown off when I say this word Shmita, and I wanted to come bring more today. So take care, God bless, and we'll see you all in the next one. Pioneers rise, build your fortress, and build your legacy.